Turn left, turn right. The wall between the two buildings was old, thick and blind. It had stood there for decades, swallowing sounds, swallowing chances. On one side lived John Liu. On the other, Eve Choi. Their windows faced the same slice of sky, their lives running in parallel lines so close they almost touched. John Liu made his living the way drifting clouds did, moving from place to place, never quite settling. His violin case was scuffed at the corners, the leather strap softened by years of use. He played weddings, hotel lounges, charity galas, sometimes street corners when money was tight. Music was the only thing that stayed. The night he met June, the gig had been in a dim hotel ballroom. Crystal chandeliers glimmered like frozen fireworks above him as he played a tired waltz. When he finished packing up, June appeared as if she'd been waiting for the music to end. "You play beautifully," she said, leaning too close. Her perfume was sharp, overwhelming. "Let me drive you home." John hesitated. "That's really not necessary." "I insist." During the ride, she laughed too loudly, placed her hand on his knee, then his arm, her fingers tracing veins as if she owned them. The streetlights flickered past like warning signs. "Please," John said, voice tight, "could you stop the car?" June smiled. "You're so shy." When the car slowed at an intersection, John unbuckled, shoved the door open and ran. His violin case bounced painfully against his back as he sprinted toward his apartment building, heart hammering. He didn't look back. The next morning, pale and shaken, he spotted June standing on the left corner of his building, sunglasses hiding her eyes. She waved. John turned around immediately. From that day on, he never went left. Eve Choi worked with words the way John worked with sound. She translated novels, Russian, Japanese, English, into Chinese, carefully weighing each sentence like it might explode if mishandled. When her editor handed her the manuscript of a foreign horror novel, Eve laughed nervously. "Do I really have to do this one?" "You're the best we have," her editor said. "Besides, it's just fiction." At night, Eve sat alone at her desk, the glow of her laptop painting shadows on the walls. The novel was cruelly vivid, scratching sounds behind walls, whispers in empty rooms. As she typed, she began to hear her own apartment settle and breathe. "Scratch." Eve froze. She turned slowly toward the hallway. "Hello," she called. Silence. The next morning, exhausted and pale, she noticed the tree to the right of her building. She had passed it every day without thought, but now its twisted branches looked like claws. Its bark split like a screaming mouth. That night, translating another chapter about a possessed house, Eve shut her curtains tightly. From then on, she never went right. The fountain. They met in the park by accident, or maybe because accidents sometimes know exactly what they're doing. Eve had dropped her folder when a sudden gust of wind flipped it open. Papers flew everywhere, several landing directly in the fountain. "Oh no," she cried. John knelt without thinking, rolling up his sleeves. "It's okay, I'll get them." They worked in silence, hands brushing, water dripping from the pages. Eve laughed, embarrassed. John smiled, startled by how familiar she felt. "You know," Eve said slowly, squinting at him, "did you ever go to the amusement park outside Taipei when you were in middle school?" John blinked. "Yeah, field trip." Her eyes widened. "I asked a boy there for his phone number." John's breath caught. "You lost your bag on the train." They stared at each other, then burst out laughing. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavy. "We should exchange numbers," Eve said quickly, scribbling on a scrap of paper, "before we lose each other again." They didn't exchange names. They didn't notice the rain soaking the ink. They ran in opposite directions. Missed calls. That night, both lay in bed smiling, feverish and shivering. John stared at his expired medicine, then pushed it aside. Eve forgot hers entirely, too happy to think straight. By morning, their throats burned, heads pounding. Worse, the phone numbers had bled into grey ghosts. They called anyway. Wrong number. Disconnected. Restaurant. Both of them made the same decision that afternoon, separated by concrete and coincidence. I won't go out. What if they call while I'm gone? So they ordered delivery. Ruby. Hello, Ruby's kitchen, Ruby said cheerfully for the 5th time that hour. When she delivered John's order, she fell in love immediately. He looked fragile violin case propped by the door, eyes gentle even through fever. You should rest, she said, lingering. On his table lay the smudged paper. You're looking for someone, Ruby said slowly. Yes, John whispered. Ruby smiled. The apartment next door, an old lady lives there. It wasn't true, but lies could be useful. John glanced instinctively toward the wall. He felt irrationally relieved. Across the wall, Ruby made the same delivery to Eve later that evening. Eve apologized repeatedly for her messy apartment, for her coughing, for everything. Ruby noticed the papers there too. 2 smudged phone numbers. 2 lonely apartments. 1 walls. Ruby said nothing, not yet. The hospital. John collapsed during the night, violin clattering to the floor. Ruby, who had inexplicably stayed nearby, rushed him to the hospital. Eve's neighbors called an ambulance when she fainted in her hallway. They arrived within an hour of each other. Doctor Who adjusted his glasses, stunned. Eve. She squinted at him through fever-glazed eyes. Who, Minjuan? He smiled, professional but unmistakably warm. It's been a long time. He ordered tests immediately, upgraded her room, checked on her far more often than necessary. Each visit carried the same unspoken sentence, I never stopped liking you. John, meanwhile, sat on a gurney, shivering. You're stable, Doctor Who said briskly. You can go home. He can barely sit up, Ruby snapped. You're sending him away because he doesn't have a fever chart you like. Doctor Who frowned, annoyed, then relented. 1 night, observation only. Ruby smiled victoriously. Before the IV drips and medicine lulled them into sleep, both John and Eve made the same request. If someone calls, John murmured to Ruby, pressing his keys into her hand, could you leave a message? Eve did the same with Doctor Who. Just in case, she said weakly. The next days passed in alternating sleep and dreams. John dreamed of rain-soaked fountains. Eve dreamed of music leaking through walls. Betrayals. When they were discharged, still weak but alive, both returned home to something wrong. John's apartment smelled different, cleaner, lived in. Ruby stood in his kitchen, wearing an apron that wasn't hers. Oh, you're back, she said brightly. I thought I'd stay a few days, you need help. John swallowed. Ruby, I appreciate it, but... You're in love with someone else, she finished quietly. I know. Across the wall, Eve found Doctor Who reorganizing her bookshelf, her horror manuscript stacked neatly aside. I thought I'd make things easier for you, he said. We could try again. Eve shook her head, tears forming. I'm sorry, my heart is already full. That night, Ruby and Doctor Who met at a bar neither usually visited. They drank too much. They talked too honestly. They don't even know how close they were, Ruby said bitterly. Doctor Who stared at his glass. Maybe they should. They mailed the photographs a week later. Elevators. Stairwells. Cafes. The park from different angles, minutes apart. John's hands shook as he spread them out. Eve cried silently as she did the same. Still, when Ruby handed John a phone number, Eve's number, he folded it carefully and placed it in his drawer. If I call, he said, and she isn't there, I don't think I could bear it. Eve made the same choice. The walls. Frustration hardened into resolve. I'll take the overseas orchestra tour, John told his agent. I'll accept the foreign posting, Eve told her editor. The night before departure, both packed in silence, pausing now and then, sensing something unfinished. The earthquake came at dawn. Concrete screamed, the wall cracked then collapsed entirely. Dust filled the air. Through it, John saw Eve standing in the ruins, staring at him in disbelief. So, she said hoarsely, you were right here. John laughed, crying at the same time. All this time. The wall had been blind. But it had finally learned how to fall.